Hello, this is Russell from Russell Tracy Photography, and today I want to do a quick editing video showing the basic process that I go through when I edit portraits. So before we get into this, the number one thing to portrait photography is getting a good shot in camera. If you don't have a good shot in camera, you're going to have a hard time in post-processing getting the photo to look good. The next thing is the programs that I'm going to be using are Lightroom and Photoshop, and it's pretty basic, pretty basic programs. If you're a photographer, you should have these programs. You can get them for fairly inexpensive off of Adobe's website. So the first thing that I do when I go to edit a portrait or any photo, the first thing that I do is I make sure that it's actually sharp. So for portraits, I want to look at the eyes, make sure the eyes are sharp. So the first thing that I always do is I always zoom in and just check the focus on the eyes. This one looks pretty good, so we're going to go with this one. And I had already picked this one out, so it doesn't really matter. But that's always the first thing that I do when I'm picking photos. It could be the best photo, perfectly composed, perfect action, perfect whatever, lighting, whole 9 yards, but if it's out of focus, it's out of focus. And that's it. The image is ruined. You can't fix that. So the first thing that I do is I go in and the first thing I always do is I set my color profile and white balance. So if you watched any of my other videos, I use a X-Rite color checker passport to set color profiles. Not everybody has one, so I'm going to use the Adobe ones just to kind of show you what you can do if you don't have one. I highly recommend the color checker passport if you don't have one. They're inexpensive. Go ahead and pick one up. So first thing I do is all this is in the develop menu. Go all the way down to the bottom to camera calibration. When you drop down, you can see all my other profiles here, but I'm going to go down to camera portrait. And what camera portrait's going to do is it's a profile that's created by Adobe to increase skin tones. It's designed for skin tones, and you can already see before is on the left, after is on the right. It already did a pretty good job of evening out the skin tones and making them look better. And this is Again, this is what you can use if you don't have some sort of color correction like the color checker passport. Then what I do is I normally set my white balance off the gray card, but I happen to know the Kelvin temperature for the lights that I was using. These were these were my Ellen chromes, and they're right around 5500. So I'm going to set to 5500, 0 on the tint. And that's a pretty good start for me. So if I go to auto, it's going to go to 3750 because it doesn't recognize the flash. Go to flash, and again it's 5500 and 0. So that's why I always typically start right around 5500 and 0 for my in-studio white seamless portraits. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm basically just going to play right here in the basic panel. I don't really typically mess with actually before I get into that, enable lens correction and remove chromatic aberration. I forgot to mention that. That's one of the things that I normally sync across to all the photos. You can see here, it didn't really make a huge difference. This was with the 80-200 f2.8, the old school AF. It's a tank lens. Then basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to I like a lot of contrast in my photos, so I'm just going to increase the contrast and then kind of play with the highlights and the highlights and shadows in the hair and right around in here. All these blown out spots, these highlighted spots, I'm going to take care of those in Photoshop. So I'm just going to decrease the highlights a little bit, pull down the shadows so there's a little bit more depth in the shadows, increase the whites because this is white seamless, so I want this to be perfectly white. If I go and underexpose this, you can see that there's a lot of imperfections in the backdrop. But in the final image, you won't be able to see that. So then I'm just going to drop the blacks down a little bit. And I like to use the clarity slider. A lot of people don't, but I like to use it. I just add just a tad bit of clarity. Now I'm looking at this and it looks a little bit dark. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and kind of play with this a little bit to get some good tones and good contrast between the hair and the face and everything like that. So that's pretty much all I do in Lightroom. I just do basic minor corrections in Lightroom. So now that I'm done with the basic corrections, I'm going to export this photo. So we'll go back into, well, before we do that, I'll show you the before and after. Before, again, is on the left, after is on the right. A lot of people don't like the high contrast and stuff like that. It just happens to be my particular style of editing. But, you know, to each his own. You need to find a style that you like and stick with it. So I'm going to go back into the library, and I'm going to right-click, export, and I have just a standard action set up. So I save in the folder as original, and I put in a subfolder _Lightroom edit. So all my JPEGs are going to go into the same folder. So I have all the raw files in one folder, and then the subfolder with all the edited photos. Everything is kept the same, 100%. Color space is sRGB. I don't resize. I don't sharpen. I don't add a watermark or anything like that. I'm just going to go to export. It's going to do its thing, and then I'm going to come down here to bridge, and you can see here, this is the folder that I have. Here's the raw file, and then I have the other folder with the JPEG. So there's the JPEG right there, and I'm going to open this up in Photoshop. Now, one of the other things that I do when I edit, I got to get this out. So I use a little Wacom tablet. They're really handy to have. You just have the little pen, and you can use that instead of using a mouse or finger. Some people like it, some people don't. All right, so now that we're in Photoshop, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a copy of this background. So I'm going to do that. You can do that a couple ways. You can just drag it down here to the new copy, or you can right click and do duplicate, or if you go up and you hit Control J on the keyboard, you can create a background copy. Because what I like to do is I like to create a layer and then apply opacity changes. So the first thing we're going to do is, now once again I'm using Photoshop CC, is I'm going to go over to the patch tool right here. We're going to zoom in on the face. And these highlighted areas, I'm just going to kind of get rid of some of these highlighted areas. So we're just going to select the area, drag it over, and you want to pick something that's similar texture and similar exposure. And this is important later when we go to make the opacity change. Basically, all you want to do is you want to kill off these highlights. Now, it's going to look real blotchy, but we're going to fix that here in a little bit. We're just going to do this quickly. Obviously, I would take more time doing this if I was actually doing this for real. But, oh well. We're just going to roll with this. So pick the highlighted areas, and we're just going to get rid of them. So even like this area right here, It's a little highlighted, so we'll drag this around, find a good spot. Grab these two highlights on the nose. Grab the highlights on the cheek. And like I said, don't be afraid if this looks blotchy right now. You're going to fix that in a second. So just kind of grab all the highlighted areas. I've got some right here on the lips. We'll go and just get rid of those real quick. Again, take your time when you're doing this. I'm doing this quick just, so this video doesn't drag on forever. It can take a while to actually edit these photos. So now that that's done, we're going to zoom out a little bit here so you can see the before and after. Now you can see, like I said, you can see a lot of the cloning that I did in the before and the after, but you can see that all the highlights are gone. But what I'm going to do is now I'm going to go down and I'm just going to decrease this to like 35%. Now you kind of got to play with this depending on how much or how little highlights, but you can see this is 0, and when I add it, it's just going to basically just go and decrease those highlights slightly. So here's the before and the after. Now if I zoom in, you can't really see that splotchiness anymore. But it's definitely just going and cutting it down, because this layer right here, this background copy, that's how light that layer is. So you can't really see it, but it does make a difference. Now I'm going to merge these together because I like that. And what I'm going to use is an action called frequency separation. There's a lot of good tutorials on frequency separation editing. Basically what it's going to do is it's going to help match the different like blotchy areas in the photograph. So we're just going to hit OK, hit continue. When you go in here, there's a lot of good actions and stuff like that. I'm not really going to get into how this works. There's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of really good tutorials out there. But you want to select the LF, and you're going to use the lasso tool, and you're just going to select the areas where it goes from like shiny to dark, or areas where there's blotchiness, and you're just going to apply some Gaussian blur. So I'm going to select some of these areas and just kind of smooth out this blotchiness a little bit. Again, I'm doing this quickly. Take your time with this. Select a Gaussian blur that's actually going to look good. But like I said, this is just a quick video. But you'll see the difference when I show you the before and after in this photo. So I'm going to grab this area here. And you can see it's just kind of like merging these together, so there's not as harsh as a contrast between the different areas. That's kind of what you want. So we're just going to leave it with this. We'll just grab some of these spots down here by the chin, and then I think we'll be done. So now if I zoom out again, so you can see the whole face, and I'm going to turn this layer on and off. You can see it made just like a slight adjustment, not too crazy. But again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten this down. Flatten it down into this, and then flatten it down again. So now we're back to the background. Now, a lot of people are going to complain because they're like, well, you're not keeping your levels, or your different layers and stuff like that. Again, this is a basic tutorial. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create another copy, and I'm going to go up and I use a filter called Portraiture. It's from Imaginomic. And basically what this does is it it smooths out the skin. So if I zoom in here, you can see this is the before and that's after. Now I use a pretty heavy, I use smoothing medium, and you can see it makes a rather large difference. I don't really worry about that. I like to go heavy and bring it back. So I'm just going to go okay. It's going to apply it to the layer. You can see that it definitely made a huge difference as far as smoothing goes. But again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this down because I still want to get some of the texture and the detail in the face back. So if I go to about 40%, you can see basically what it did was it just smoothed out some of the harsher levels. Now I might actually bump this up just a little bit, try 45%, and that's pretty much it. So there's the before, there's the after. We'll zoom all the way out, before and after. Doesn't make too much of a huge difference. And some people will be like, well, why do it if you're not making a huge difference? I try to keep photos as natural and as true to the person as possible. So that's just my editing style. So now we're going to flatten this down. I have another action here for eyes. It's just to sharpen the eyes. So you go in and grab the paintbrush tool, and basically we're just going to go in and do a little bit of sharpening on the eyes, nothing too crazy, because again what we're going to do is we're going to go and knock this layer down. It's just quick pass over the eyes. So you can see here's the before and the after. Now this makes a huge difference. But again, I'm going to knock this down. I'm going to keep this a little stronger than the other ones. I'm going to go to like 75% just to make the eyes pop a little bit. So now if I go back to 100%, there's just a slight little pop in the eyes. And that's pretty much it. Now, again, this is just a quick editing thing, just kind of some of the small techniques that I use for headshots and stuff like that. I'm going to save this, and I'll show you both of these side by side. So I'm going to open up in Finder, editing, and I'm going to grab this out of here, drag it into the main folder so you can see both of them. So here's the before and the after. Let's see if I can get them both next to each other. I don't think it's going to let me. Well, here's the before and here's the after. We'll zoom in here to 200% before and after. Again, this was quick. These are just basically for the techniques that I use. But if you have any questions, comments, anything specifically editing-wise that you want to see, go ahead and leave a comment below, or my contact information is going to be in the description. If you liked this video and you want to see more like this, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't done so, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. This is Russell from Russell Tracy Photography. Have a good day.